Welcome, everybody. We are going to be working today on the Unit 2 assignment, but as a precursor to working on the Unit 2 assignment, we're going to load up a sample database to have some data to work with so that we have something to run our SQL commands against so we can get results, right, without having to worry about building it from scratch. The My Guitar Shop database is one that is originally created by other parties, by the way, and we are just borrowing the content. These are free and open source databases that are out on the web. This one we've loaded up on one of our school servers, by the way. And if you guys notice up here above, they have a different sample database, which is basically the same one, if you guys are wondering. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click this link. This resides basically on one of our school servers here. I'm going to open this up in a new tab. And really what this is doing is it's trying to download that file. It should be doing it. And I'm not sure if maybe the server is offline now. So remember I said, I put it on my own server because I can get access to it. Well, here's an example of it right now. All right. So let me just try doing a straight click on it here. Are you guys having the same result? Are you not going anywhere? You guys are fine. All right, I'm gonna pause the recording here really quick. All right, so I'm having difficulty getting it off of our server, so I do need to go into the server ultimately and figure out why the link's not working. So I'm just wondering if this content was deleted or moved or folder names changed. That's all possible, by the way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a different spot where you can get the file that we need. And that's down here in the course resources folder. Right here, there's a link. So the SQL file is actually right within our course shell. So if you go to course resources and then download this file, right? And I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can see it is now, well, it looks like it actually downloaded. Okay, so now I feel really extra dumb. But yeah, it already downloaded from one of the previous links. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just be mindful of the fact that this file is sitting here, and then I'm going to use MySQL Workbench to open up and load the script and build the database. All right, so that's in my downloads folder. Meanwhile, I'm going to do a couple of other things preemptively here to make sure that I'm ready to work with MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench. Now, after the install that we did in the previous weeks, we learned that MySQL loads as a service in Windows, and you may have opted to run it automatically, which is what I typically recommend for students, or you might be one of those people like me that decides not to run it memory resident except when I'm using it. So right now you can see it's loaded as a service, but it is not running. And so I'm going to right click and choose start, watch it starting, and now it's running. So the server is running in the background. So when I load up MySQL Workbench, it has something to connect to. If you decided to run this automatically and it's just running right now, just leave it alone, at least for the semester. Right, that's my recommendation. Right. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up MySQL Workbench. So we'll let that load up. And you can see it coming up on my screen here. And I already have a tile created to connect to the database. We talked about this last time. When you did the install, it asked you to create a root user account. Usually the username on that is root, R-O-O-T. And then usually you run on port 3306, by the way, and then a password that you created. And the fair warning I give people is don't lose that password, because if you lose that password, the only fix is to uninstall and reinstall the server. And then all the database content is also blown away, right? So make record of it somehow, whatever password manager you use, the post-it note on your monitor, whatever, use whatever practice is best for you. I'm going to go ahead now and connect to the local instance of it running. I do notice, for example, here, and we talked about this last time, I have a bunch of different schemas that are loaded up inside my product here in the left sidebar because I've done this before. Um, Last week we downloaded a database, we got it installed. And since I need to do that process to demonstrate for you guys, I'm actually going to begin by doing something kind of weird, which is I'm going to drop the database I have already and then add it back. All right. So I can do this manually, and I'm going to type the command to do it that way. But I also want to show you that in my downloads folder, if I look inside the SQL file with any sort of text editor, right? And I'm using Notepad++ in this case, doesn't really matter what the tool is. I'm just looking inside the file because it's a plain text file. And that's an important concept too. On encoding, all our code files are all plain text, no rich text, right? The coloring here is by virtue of the syntax highlighter in this coding tool. Notice that this file, the SQL file, is a collection of SQL statements. And right now I just got a little message that said my internet was unstable, so I apologize if I hiccup there a little bit. My recording should be okay. But this is a collection of SQL statements, each of which terminates with a semicolon. So I'll have you notice here, right? And then when you have one that's a little more complex, in multi-line, it still terminates with a semicolon. The point of the file is it automates all of these commands, right? The very first command is to get rid of the database that we're talking about if it already exists, right? So I could just run the script file and trust that it's going to delete it only if it exists, and then recreate it and put the same data back in. It's not that I don't trust it, but I just want to show you that I'm going to do this manually so you can see it go away and then see it come back. That's my reason for doing it. If you already have it here and just want to run the command again, you don't really have to delete it, but I'm just demonstrating for the sake of it. I am zooming in a little bit on my code, and I'm going to be kind of conventional here. And I'm going to type my first SQL commands, all caps, and I'm going to drop my database called my guitar shop. And notice how it auto-completed that, right? That's the IntelliSense built into the product. It says drop database. Oh, you want me to get a list of databases then? And as soon as I started typing the letter M, it said, oh, you have one that starts the letter M. Here, I'll just put it on the screen, right? And then I pressed enter and it captured it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to execute this statement. And you'll notice here that the my guitar shop database has disappeared from my schema list. But to make sure, I'm going to hit this tiny little icon here, which is a refresh icon, by the way. And it indeed is gone. Now I'm going to delete that statement. We'll use this blank query later, by the way, to build it. When we were here last time, we did run the same command. I realized that, and this seems kind of silly to run it again. But this is in lieu of doing the homework and to kind of go through all the stuff in this unit folder so that you guys are all clear on how to do it. The first step of this is to go to your file menu and open up a SQL script file. And the SQL script file is the one that we downloaded. I downloaded it multiple times, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab whichever one. Doesn't really matter. They're all identical. And this is the same file that we were just looking at in Notepad++. Right, looks familiar. And just to kind of reiterate, it has all the commands in it to create the database, all the tables, and populate all the tables with data. Right. There's some other commands in there that we will learn about as we get going. But at this point, I'm going to execute the entire file. And to do that, I'm just going to hit the lightning bolt here, right? The other way to run the query is to come up to the query menu, and the regular lightning bolt is equivalent to the first command here, which is execute all or selection. And I don't have anything selected, so I'm going to execute all. When it finishes, we'll refresh and we'll see the database should be listed here in the aftermath. So I'm hitting the run button. There it goes. You can see in the output window at the bottom, after each command is executed, it sends back a message, right? And it will list here. Some of them will come back green, which is successful. Some of them will come back yellow. And if, those are things that you should heed. So the command maybe didn't work, but there's a reason for it and it's not anything critical. But if you see a red X or something like that, that means it didn't work and it was bad. So read that statement so you can see what went wrong. But generally speaking, these are all greens and yellows. Almost all of them are green. And so we're okay. If I come back up here now in the schema panel and hit the little refresh, you will see the guitar shop appear. And then once again, as we were kind of exploring last week, you can hit the little expander arrows here in the schema and expand them to see things like all the tables, right? If you're not seeing the schemas tab, just be mindful that there's also an administration tab, and you might be stuck in that mode. You might be here as opposed to being here. I am seeing an unstable internet message thing here again. So I'm going to pop off the VPN here for a second. So I'm going to pause for a second. Hold tight. All right, now my VPN is off, so maybe my internet connection will be a little bit more stable. What we are going to do now is just we're going to take a very quick little look at some data, right? And some of the tools. We did a little bit of this last week, but we're going to do it again, right? Reinforcement is good. And the script file that we executed is loaded up in one of the tabs up here after it's been run. There's no functional reason to keep it open. There's no functional reason to close it either. So you want to keep it open, keep it open. If you want to close it, I'm going to close it. I do have my blank query tab here. And if you look at our course shell and you go back to unit 2 here, I have a couple of recommendations about how to kind of begin when you're working on this. So I want to go to that content. All right. Right. So we did all these tasks, but the one thing that I kind of recommend up here in the previous posting is that whenever you're working with a database and you want to attach to it, you have to make sure you use a use statement to attach, and then you can run your queries, right? So, all right, so this is kind of weird, but when you have one database loaded, not a big problem. As you can see in my schema table, I have a bunch of them loaded, right? So if I type a SQL command and say, select star from customers, which database are you talking about? Is the first issue. So one of the first commands that you learn how to do is the use command. I'll go all caps for right now, but I'll just call the database by name. So for example, I'll just say my underscore guitar shop, semicolon. And my cursor is currently on that line. I will hit the second lightning bolt, which is execute basically under the cursor. I think that's how they put it. Execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. All right, so I'm going to do that. And it ran. And if you look at the very bottom of my output window, use my guitar shop. 0 rows affected. I didn't change any data, but now any command that follows will be attached to this database, not the others. So often, if you have multiple databases available, that's your first step, is just run that statement. Make sure you're connecting to the right database. Kind of primitive, but important. All right. And then we can see the names of the tables here, right? Like customers. So if I want to, in this case, I'll break the uppercase thing. I'll go lowercase just to show you that it works. I'm going to say select what star, all the columns from which table, a table called customers. Notice customers is all lowercase here. And then a semicolon. Cursor's on that line. I can use the lightning bolt with the cursor button. I'm going to run it. It ran the query against the table. and it pulled back all the customer information. And notice the return result is a table. This is all the columns and all the data. Okay. Another way you can do this, if you ever just want to look in a table and basically type that command, is you can just simply go to the table here in the toolbar. Of course, you have to expand all these little arrows to get there. But let's say I want to look at the orders table. There's a little icon here that looks like a little mini table. If you click that, notice it creates a query that selects all the columns and from the correct table. I do want you to notice, though, that it doesn't mess around because there's no use statement in this query. So it identifies both the database dot the table name. So it's a fully qualified name. So it gives you database and table. But it does allow you to see the information. Notice it also created it in a separate tab. This is a very useful basic command because whenever you're working in a database, and I think I mentioned this last week, one of the first things you need to do is you got to look at the data and just see what it's about. You know, if you have a lot of entries, you could add the limit command that we just learned about to minimize the number of return results. So if they had like 50 million orders, I wouldn't want to look at all of them. I'd still be waiting for it to come up on screen. Right. So I might add a limit command to kind of filter that down. All right. Assuming that everybody's okay, you guys are all good. This is all working for everybody. All right. And this is kind of repeat from last week. And I realized that. All right. Let's turn our attention now to the homework. We're going to talk about how to do the homework, and then we're going to start completing this list of tasks here. I will say up front that with some of the homework that we do in this class, I just put it into a assignment entry just like this, where I will give you the list of what you're doing, and I expect that you complete each task, and then that you also will basically complete it in a very specific type of fashion. Sometimes you'll be given a document where you add your screenshots and code to the document along with answers to questions usually, or you're going to be given instructions to do the work and screenshot your work and put that into a document, which is what we're going to do tonight. Right. For some of you, this could be brand new, so I apologize if you already know how to do this. It's not because I'm challenging your intellect. It's because I just want you to be aware, because some people are brand new to this and have never done it before. There's some notes here. So it says general notes. So let's just read through them. Perform each task as listed. When completing key steps, perform a screenshot of the code and the output window and copy it into a Word document and add some text explaining what is being shown. Make sure to answer questions also. I suggest including the text of the question in your document for clarity. Also add comments if you feel compelled to explain when things worked, what struggles you had, or showing that it's not working. Even if things aren't working, and it says, oh, if things aren't working, email for help. And I do mean that sincerely. My plan typically is to try to start coding assignments before we leave a session and then finish them when we come back, hopefully to get you on the right path. But sometimes we can finish them. I'm hoping that's the case tonight. We only have 15 minutes. We'll see, but we'll try. So I indicate here which database to use. So sometimes we'll use different databases. It'll depend. But here's our steps, so we're going to do each one of these. And then when we're done, we're going to do this step, which is to capture your screenshots and output windows, answer all the questions, and put it all in a Word document. And that's what you're going to be submitting ultimately. You're not going to give me a copy of your database. That's the whole point. So I'm going to begin by actually creating that Word document. So I'm going to bring up Microsoft Word, and I will just say up front, you can also do this in Google Docs if that's your preferred platform, right? If you would rather use Microsoft Word and you don't have it, I can show you how to get a copy of it. Just hit me up when class ends and I'll give you the little clue in on that. But let's just say for the sake of demo here, and I'm going to see if I can bring up Google Docs at the same time so I can demonstrate it in both. So I'm going to go to my Google Drive. And of course, I'm attached to my personal one that I don't want to be. Let's attach to my gateway one. And somewhere inside your drive, you'll create a new document. All right, so I'll have a blank document in Google and I'll have a blank document in Microsoft Word, and I will show you both. So here's my blank document. And you might want to do something like unit 2 homework, maybe my name, whatever details you want to put in there, that's on you. And let's go into MySQL Workbench and I'll show you quickly how to do a couple of captures. And then I'm just going to assume from here on in that you know how to do that. But the plan would be when code works, I want to see the code. I also want to see the output window, and I want it labeled. So, it's clear to me. Also, if there's any questions, like I might say, like, how many products were there? I want you to give me the question and the answer. So let's just kind of do all of that. So let's do the first one let's just make it an example, right? So I'm just going to call it an example. We'll do the same thing here. Example. And you see how I'm like going down a line as I'm doing this. Now, if you're working in Microsoft Windows, which I assume most of you are, you'll go to your Windows menu and search for the snipping tool. The snipping tool will come up like this, right? Notice that inside the snipping tool window, there's also a thing that says press the Windows logo key, Shift and S to start a snip. So you can bypass going to the menu to find it if you remember that keystroke command. But generally the way it works is you click the new button, your screen changes, your cursor changes, you click and drag, and you've got a capture. And then once you have a capture, you don't have to save these, by the way. I never save them, but if you want to, go for it, whatever. I just hit the copy button or Command C, and then I go to my document and I paste it in, right? And it's there. And then you see where my cursor is flashing. I usually press enter, then I paste in the next one, type in some words, and I kind of have my document. So to give you a demo then of how to do that within MySQL Workbench, I'm just going to pop over there really quick. And here's an example of a query that I used. In fact, this might even be the answer to the first question, if I remember right. So here's my code. Here's my output, right? That's already on the screen. I could conceivably capture all of this in one screenshot pretty efficiently. So in this case, I would maybe do that. So here's my snipping tool. I'm going to click the new button. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to grab all of the visible content that's pertinent. And notice I'm not capturing the whole screen. The problem with that is if you have a really big monitor and you capture the whole screen and you put it in a document, there's no way I'm reading any of it. That's really kind of what it is. So I'm going to copy this image. I'm going to go to, this time I'll do it in Word, and I'll just paste it here, and it shows both my code and my output, and I can see that it worked, right? If I'm doing separate screenshots of each, because that's a thing too, but sometimes you can't get it all to fit, you can just grab the code, copy that, put it in your document, right? See how much bigger that is when you do a smaller screenshot. And then I can copy my output. And I try to get really tight on it, or reasonably tight. And then once again, we'll put that in our document, usually on the next line down. And there you go. Right. And ideally, you would label this and add comments, and if there was a question, you would provide the answer and you would do it in the document, right? And then you do this for each one of the steps. And then ultimately the homework you're submitting is this document, right? Because I don't have the capability of getting on your system to look at your database to make sure that you did it right. The screenshots are the best mechanism that we have. If you're working in the Google Docs platform, when you're done, you want to make sure that you download a copy in Word format And the reason I ask for word format is that comes up automatically in the grading system. So it's the easiest one for me to grade. Other acceptable ones would be like a PDF would be okay as well, by the way. All right, let's now address the tasks one at a time. And so this says first to display all the columns and all the rows from the products table. And then it asks the question, how many items or rows are there in the products table? So let's go to MySQL Workbench. And I just want to remind you, right, that make sure that if you haven't done it already, to issue a use statement first. So even though it doesn't tell you to do that, that's kind of an expectation. So even though I've done it already, I'm running that command again, and it's using it. The next was to select everything from not the customers table, but the products table. And yeah, I can just alter that query. That's absolutely fine. And then we will run that command, and there's the output. So here's your first screenshot, folks, for question number one. This is how you do the first question. And then there's a question that goes with it, right? What's the question? How many rows are there? And I see 10 rows. And the product IDs start at 1, right? Not at 0, at 1. And there's 10 items. So the answer to the first one, this is your code. This is your output. And the answer to question number 2 is 10. All right. Is everybody okay? Everybody's commands are working all right? All right, great. All right, let's move on to the next one. Display the product code, product name, MSRP from the products table and sort in descending order. Okay. All right. That's a lot more, right? It's like, oh wow, I better go back to my lecture materials and read up on how to do multiple columns, right? But it tells me very specific columns. So we can kind of address these one at a time here. And I'm going to get my Notepad++ out of the way. It's in my way. All right. One thing that, and that nobody mentioned this, right? If let's say I ran this particular command before I do the next one, and what if it returned like a really big table, and even scrolling to get to the bottom to see how many rows I have was really untenable? Or what if the product IDs weren't numerical? Right? What if they were alphanumerical or something weird like that? There's a different way to get a count of the products. I don't know if you guys remember this from the lecture, but you could select, right, everything, but wrap the count function around it like this. You guys remember that in the lecture? And we can say from products, and then I don't even have to scroll. This will just tell me how many there are. And there it is, 10. So this is an alternate way to answer question number 2 via code. So the answer is 10. Now, another thing that you can think about here is when you're working inside of here, if it's helpful for you, you notice that I'm putting all of my SQL commands are in one file. And at the end, what I'll show you is you can save this as a SQL file, and you can also submit that with your homework. You know, that's another approach. But you might want to label this. So you might want to say inside here, number 1. Now, is that a SQL command or is that a comment? How do we comment inside a SQL code is a question. Does anybody know how to do that? Has anybody figured that out yet?
So I've seen you can do a block line comment, same way you do it in a regular programming language. Slash, star, star, slash, everything in there is commented out. And then a single line comment, I think, is just 2 dashes.
Right. So that is really the correct way to do a comment. So this approach here is where I can take a big block of code and wrap comments around it. You know, so that's one possibility. The reason I do this, of course, is I want to label what's going on. So if I want to label that this is question number one, here's the answer. And then if I want to label that this is question number two, there's the answer, etc. Do you need to do this? I'm going to say no. Right. I find it helpful sometimes. I will say this homework assignment's pretty simplistic, so you might not need to do it. All right, let's move on to question number three and see if we can figure this one out. Again, so we need product code, product name, and MSRP. Here's what I find helpful is now that I'm in the product, I might actually want to see, but you know what? Can I run this command again? Yeah, sure. If it's helpful for you to do so, here's the why I want to run it again. I want to actually look at the data and see some of the information. So there's a little intellectual leap that happens with what I'm asking in the question. So the one thing I'm asking for is a product code. Okay, I see a column for that. Great. To me, that looks more like a brand, but what they call it, product code. And then the product name. Okay, yeah, I see that's the name of the item. And then they're asking for MSRP. I don't see a column that says MSRP. What's MSRP? All right, you guys race to answer. Ask your AI really quick. It's manufacturer's suggested retail price. Some people call that list price. And hopefully we never have to pay list price. Sometimes you do when something's popular, but usually that's like what they want you to sell it for, but a lot of people will sell it for less. So that's why they have a list price and a discount percent, like, how much they can discount something and still make a profit. So let's build the query then. So we're going to say select, what are we selecting? Well, we're going to select product underscore, notice the underscore code, comma, the product underscore name, comma, and the list underscore price from products. So that's select everything in those columns. And if I wanted, I could just run this right now the way it is. Now, the other thing that we learned from the W3 schools site is a lot of times queries are structured. You can type it all in one line, or you can separate the lines. And what a lot of coders do is they kind of have this format where they'll write select on one line, from on the next line, where on the next line, order by on the next line, right? And we saw that in the examples. So right now, we are selecting from the products table, and then we're told very specific information here. So let's go back and take a look where we're going to get the product code, product name, MSRP from the products table, and sort in descending order. Okay, so we got to figure out that part. Okay, so that's an order by statement. So let's do order by. Okay, now here's what we don't know. Which one of these are we sorting by? And now I'm going to speculate, okay, because it's not really given, right? I'm going to speculate it's the product code by brand, basically. So order by product code, and they did say descending. Is that correct? Correct. So we're going to say DESC, and that does not need to be all uppercase. We'll close the statement, and we'll execute. Right now, even though I want you to be mindful of this, even though my cursor is flashing here, this is all part of the same statement. So when I hit the I-beam, cursor, lightning bolt, whatever, that's the code it's going to run. And so you should get a list that looks like this. Notice the product code is sorted descending. So for part number 3, here's your screenshot, the output and the code. Yeah. Don't screenshot it from me, though. Screenshot it from your own screen. Thank you. All right. The next ramp up to this question says display basically the same stuff. Oh, bless you.
Sorry.
That's all right. And for number 4, it says the product name, list price, end date added, where the MSRP for the products is greater than 200 and less than 500, sort it by list price in ascending order. Okay, that's a lot. All right, so let's deconstruct that just a little bit. In fact, I think I'm going to forget it. So I want you to notice what I'm doing here is I'm going to copy this text and I'm going to paste it into my IDE here. So, and I'm going to do that by using the block comments, which are the /*, and then I'm going to close it with a */. And then everything in between is ignored, by the way. And then I can paste that in here. And oh my God, that's like super wide on top of it, being verbose. But I'm going to just break apart the lines like this. And yeah, I could line wrap it, whatever. This is a little superfluous bright space character. But there's the information on my screen. Now I don't have to bounce back and forth to look for it. If you have two screens, not a big deal. But if you have to bounce back and forth, you can put the instructions right here and you can follow along with them in your document. Right. So let's build this from scratch here again. I'm going to go ahead and bring this panel down. And all right, let's type select. All right, so we need the product name. What else? We need the list price and date added. Okay. And once again, here I am not remembering what was in that table. And so this is where like maybe the screenshots would actually be helpful. Does it have a date added here? Well, this is customer, so that doesn't help me, does it? So I might actually need to run this one more time. I know this is really goofy that I'm doing that. I'm like, oh yeah, date added. I want to make sure I use the right column names, especially if my autocomplete's not helping me. And you notice like when I was typing this, I started typing date, and these are built-in functions, folks. They have nothing to do with my table. And so date added is a column though. From which table? Well, it comes from the products table because it says so up above, right? Where, okay, the list price is greater than 200. All right, now we got to talk about this. The numbers in the table are decimal numbers. I'm typing an integer right now. Should I match it? Should I do this? Probably, right? And then we're going to use the and keyword because we're checking two conditions here. We'll talk more about that later. You just copy along with what I'm doing right now, and I'll explain how the and works. And the list price is less than 500. And ideally, you would add the zeros here, but I will tell you that it'll work without doing that because it is not 200 the same as 200.00. It absolutely is. So I'm going to mix it. I'm going to use both. And then we're also told to order by list price. Okay. Query's all set to go. Let's run it, see if it works. All right. So are these coming back correctly? Name, list price, date? Yeah. From the products table? Yes. Is the list price between 200 and 500, even though I use like mixed number formats? Yes. Is it ordered by list price, lowest to highest? Right. So this is ascending. If I wanted to do it the other way around, I'm not saying you have to do this, right? By the way, you would just add that and the prices would flip, right? We'd have the highest price thing first. Sometimes, when people run reports on products, they like it that way better, by the way. All right, everybody okay with that one? Okay. Next command. And I realize that we're over time. How about this? We'll cap it here because in the interest of time, the remaining commands we'll cover when we come back next week. But I think at this point, you guys are probably armed well enough to try to complete the rest on your own. Um, so I do want you to go ahead and complete the work. If you're not sure that it's correct, you can wait to submit it because it's due 2 days after our next class. See, isn't that cool, right? That I do that so you have time to fix it. But I would encourage you to try to complete it. And if you think it's all correct, go ahead and submit it. If you end up changing it, you can submit it again. And I will grade the last one you submit. So for example, if you proceed bravely, you think you did it right, and you come to class next week, watch me code it and go, oh my God, that's totally wrong. I'm going to fix it and turn it in again. That's fine by me. Right. What's important for me though is that you kind of see the process that we're using now and that you start working on the code on your own, and hopefully you can get it all on your own. All right, folks, this video will end here. So part 2 of this exercise completion will be presented next week.